Hey, I'd like to share a story with you. It's a story about how a Honda became a Harley, and then much more, it turned into my Frankenstein. It's a story about the fruit of my obedience. It covers over 20 years of my life, and I'll try and condense it into 20 minutes. In 1989, I bought a modified Honda CB 750K model for about $200. It needed a lot of work, but it was roadworthy and seemed like a good project. So year after year, I'd spend a little bit more money on it and continue to modify it and fix it up to what I wanted it to look like. In the summer of 1996, I injured my right elbow at work, and it meant that I couldn't work anymore, but it also meant that I couldn't ride my motorcycle. I knew my pastor really liked that motorcycle, so I loaned it to him and let him ride it for 6 weeks. Maybe that wasn't such a good idea because he really liked that bike. He must have been praying, and God must have been listening to his prayers because the Lord suggested to me that I should give him my motorcycle. Sure, I'd consider that after I had another motorcycle to ride for myself. It seemed like just a suggestion until about July 1998, and it seemed to become more of a command to give my pastor my motorcycle. I wrestled with God all summer long about that, but he won. About mid August, I finally presented my motorcycle to my pastor. And the way I did it was I went over and asked him if he had $5. He thought maybe I was just wanting to borrow $5. As he passed me the $5, I had the keys cupped in my hands, and I just dropped the keys into his hands and said, "Well, now you own my motorcycle." I did manage to slip the $5 and the signed ownership document into the saddlebag that he would find it later, but now I didn't have a bike to ride. People kept asking me what I was going to do without having a motorcycle to ride. I was the president of a Christian motorcycle club. I kept telling them I did have a motorcycle to ride. I didn't have a serial number yet, and so I couldn't register it. And when God provided the serial number, then I'd register it. We had a coffee house ministry operating in a restaurant on the main street of Winnipeg. One evening, a friend of mine walked in and introduced me to a lady, and she had this Ironhead Sportster that she needed to sell really quick. The price seemed cheap, but the suspicious story about needing to sell it really quick left me suspicious, so I stalled her while I ran some checks through friends of mine on the serial number to make sure it had a clean title. She came back a few days later, and I shared Jesus with her and told her a little bit more of my own testimony and what I was about. She accepted Jesus as her Lord and Savior, and she sold me a motorcycle, and I went and picked it up. It did need a lot of work, so I started fixing it up to get it ready for a safety inspection. And another friend suggested a shop where I should take the bike. I agreed, and I told the shop owner where. And I got the recommendation from whom. I got the recommendation. Well, he drummed up a little business for himself and said the bike needed other work that I hadn't bargained for. When I went and picked up the bike, what I wasn't prepared for was that someone else had paid that repair bill. It was a real testimony to the shop owner about Christians and how we operate and how we love and serve one another. I was just really blessed to be able to share with that shop owner. We loaded the bike onto a truck, and shortly after, I headed down to Daytona Motorcycle Rally in Florida. 5 days later, I was there, and I unloaded the bike and got it out to try it because I still hadn't ridden the motorcycle yet. And a friend of mine from North Carolina was there. He asked whatever happened to that previous Honda chopper that I had. I told him the story, and he got really kind of sick looking in the face. Said that God was dealing with him. He did something I didn't expect. He told me he was going to give me a 1970 Triumph Tiger 650, and it was at home, and it was there. Come pick it up on my way back north. Yeah, his story checked out. It was true. He had a lot of motorcycles, and this Triumph was just 90% restored. The bike had been in storage for 5 years. It needed cleaning, but it didn't take much at all to get it to run And my wife and I enjoyed it. It was a nice little scooter to ride around on. And we took it up and left it in Minnesota at my friend's place. And we go down there to visit. And one time when I was in Thunder Bay, Ontario, at the denominational conference, the district superintendent was there, and he called me up on stage and told people about the work I was doing with the bikers in Winnipeg. And he started to tease me because I'd given my motorcycle, that Honda Chopper, to my pastor and wondered where his bike was. Well, not being at a loss for words, I told him I had lots of parts and I'd built him a motorcycle. But the Lord started speaking to me about it because lots of people gave me stuff, and sometimes it was just junk. They'd give me junk and think they were trying to bless me, and it was junk. And I'd say, "May the Lord bless you in according to the way you have blessed me." But now I couldn't just build him a motorcycle out of all my spare parts. I knew I had to do better than that. I knew I had to come up with more than just a spare parts motorcycle. As the summer wore on, I had the Sportster, and then I'd go down into Minnesota and I'd ride the Triumph. I prayed and prayed, and I needed to sell one bike. I needed the cash, and well, the Sportster was just better for our ministry in Winnipeg and the area of Manitoba. The Triumph, while it was a lot of fun, I got convicted, told, felt, led that I should give it to that pastor over in Thunder Bay, who was the district superintendent. In the next few years, I did ride the Sportster and got a lot of fun out of it. And that pastor over in Thunder Bay, he really enjoyed that Triumph, and it was a blessing to him. I fixed the Sportster time and time again. I got a lot of miles out of it. But this one winter, I had a terrible time. Everything I was working on took twice as long to make it happen. And it just seemed like I had lots of thumbs and no fingers. And I was used to working on my own motorcycles, but this this wasn't going so well this winter. And my wallet was empty, but I finally got the bike up and running and fixed, and I was riding it again. One of the first events we have every year is that we'd have an icebreaker ride. This season, we are having an icebreaker ride down to Baudette, Minnesota on May 10th, 2003. It was going to be a good day. It was raining off and on all day long. Many of our friends showed up. One couple showed up, and I thought, that's kind of odd. They were our church friends, and they rarely showed up at any of our motorcycle events. Especially nothing as primitive as this, is motorcycles, campfires, and shooting guns. But hey, they were good for it, and we got together, and our host started to share a few words. His name was John Campbell. We called him John Deere. He actually built a chopper with John Deere colors and had a tractor seat for a seat. I was thinking, because they're all picking on me and looking at me, that maybe they're going to reduce me down to being like a prospect or something. Is this some kind of mutiny? They were ganging up on me. Now, one of my other friends was talking, and he reminded me about my obedience to the Lord, how I was given motorcycles and gave them away. He reminded me and the others about just that I had an attitude of giving. He had questions about the two motorcycles I had given away, and would I do that again? And he's asking me to hand over the ownership for my Sportster. But just 1 minute, I need to talk to my wife. Now, you see, I don't hear God talking to me, but at that moment, but these men, I trust them, and there's church elders here and close friends here, and I would trust these people with my life. If they ask me for my bike, God will take care of it. And I spoke to my wife, and she agreed, and we said, okay. I signed my ownership for that Sportster and handed over the keys for the Sportster. Some of the guys had tears in their eyes, and some of them were giggling. Now they have a cake for me, but it isn't my birthday. They called me into the next room, and my birthday wasn't for another month, but I thought maybe this is like AA, you give away 3 motorcycles and you get a cake. Time to eat. Well, it didn't seem fair. It didn't seem fair because my piece of cake had a key in it. I wanted another piece of cake. You see, I'm not always the brightest candle on a cake. Here's the key of my cake piece, and I want another piece. Now, another guy, he's got tears in his eyes, and he's telling me that that key is for a 1998 FLH TCUI, and it's out there in the barn. And it was a gift to Lynn and I and from all our friends. They kept mouthing off some young guy in the corner about that being an old geezer bike. I slapped him later. I don't know who all was involved. I really don't. I know a few people. I knew a few people that I could mention, but to mention them, then it leaves some other people off the list that I've forgotten their involvement or I just didn't know. But it was pretty special.